This happened around 2006 when I was 11 years old. My cousin Aaron was spending the week with my sister and I over summer vacation. At some point during the week, my mom decided to take us all to McDonald's. We ordered and took our food to the back of the McDonald's to sit at a table connected to one of those super long booths along the wall nearest to the bathrooms. Sitting on the same booth, but a few tables down, was an older man sitting by himself. He was probably in his 60s, a bit overweight, balding, and had huge lens 80s style glasses on. He was wearing a dirty t-shirt with gray sweatpants. When we first walked in, I noticed him, but he kept his head down and didn't seem to pay any attention to us, so I kind of blew him off and almost forgot that he was there. My mom had my brother in his car seat by the table and was feeding him french fries. He must have either choked or got sick because he started throwing up all over the place. My mom grabbed him and rushed into the bathroom with him, followed by my sister to help. Aaron and I were left alone at the table. All of a sudden, the old dude looks over at us and starts trying to have a conversation with us. It started with the casual, "Hey, how are you guys doing?" And then he said something about hoping my brother was okay. So we politely responded, thinking that's all that he wanted to say. But then he immediately started getting weird. He asked our ages, which we told him, and then he started asking our names and where our moms worked. So, being kids, we told him that also. The man then looked down at his phone and said that our mom had just texted him saying they would be a while in the bathroom and that he was supposed to bring us home because it was getting late. Although I knew my mom had never even talked to this man once. So, even as a kid, I knew something was off. The man then grabbed our hands and said we should hurry. At this point, we were practically being dragged outside. We got outside, and this man started leading us into an old, run-down white van. He opened the back door and said that we could stay in there for the ride. Luckily, just then, some younger guy had spotted us and instantly went over and told the manager what was going on. As this was happening, my mom and my sister also came out of the bathroom, saw what was going on, and screamed while running outside to us. At this point, we hadn't gotten in the van yet, but the man was trying to push us in. Now hearing my mom's screams, I instantly started pushing back, trying to keep myself from entering. The guy quickly gives up as the manager and my mother are fast approaching. The guy gets in the driver's seat and steps on it with his back door still open. My mom was still yelling at us, and we started crying. We didn't know what to think. To this day, this experience still horrifies me. I don't know why me and my cousin were stupid enough to go along with what this guy was saying, but I'm just glad my mom showed up when she did. My first job was at McDonald's. This building was attached to a gas station and located off of a busy highway. I was 16 and started a 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. shift. This early, the store was usually empty, so only 3 people, myself included, were in the restaurant. These people were my manager, who was in the back, the cook, who was also in the back, and myself, the cashier, who was up front. I was wiping down the counter when a man who looked to be in his mid-30s or early 40s came in. He didn't order anything, but went straight to the restrooms, which were in the restaurant area just around the corner from my cash register. Many truckers and travelers would come in simply to use the washrooms and leave, so this was not an uncommon occurrence. I didn't think much of it, but after the man finished, he came up to the counter and said, "Excuse me, I just used the washroom, and one of the toilets is overflowing." I immediately came around the counter and let him lead me towards the restrooms. Suddenly, I got a horrible feeling in the pit of my stomach and stopped dead in my tracks. I became very aware that no one was in the restaurant area, and the only other 2 people in the store were in the back and wouldn't be able to hear me if I went into the restroom. I felt this overwhelming sense of being lured in. The man had the restroom door open and realized I had paused. He said, "Come on in, I'll show you," which came off innocently enough, but it didn't sit well with me. I smiled and said, "I'll get my manager," and I started making my way back to the counter. "It'll only take a minute," he called out. I met my manager in the back and explained to him that a man was complaining about an overflowing toilet. My manager went to check it out, and I followed closely behind him. When we turned the corner, the man was gone, and we entered the restroom. no toilet was overflowing. We exchanged a look and never brought it up again. As we were leaving the washroom, I glanced into the parking lot and I saw a car driving away. It was the man. He gave me a terrifying death stare as I drove off. To this day, I don't know what gave me that feeling to not follow the man into the restroom, but I'm glad I stopped to think about what I was doing. The whole situation only lasted a few seconds, but it felt like forever. I was young and trusting, and this man could have done who knows what, and I wouldn't have been hurt. He could have left, got away with whatever it was he had planned, and hit the highway.
Everybody had that creepy dude they knew from school or hung out with. In my school, we all called him Jay, and he was perhaps the creepiest of the creepy. I had the unenviable honor of being there on his first day. It was kindergarten, and a lot of the kids threw a fit when they were separated from their parents. I don't hold that against them. We were only 5 after all. Rather than accepting the separation and joining the others in class, he made things even worse. His mom hadn't been gone 10 minutes, and he soiled himself. This wasn't a reaction to stress, like you may expect. It turned to be out of pure spite. He must have used this before to control people. When the teacher called his mother, she returned in a matter of minutes and took him home. He had such a smug look on his face as he left, and I knew even then as a little kid that things weren't getting better. The following day, his mother dropped him off in class and he repeated the disgusting behavior, and, of course, his mother was called again to pick him up. This vicious power play continued for a week. His mom would leave. He'd bawl his head off for 5 minutes straight, only to soil himself again. You probably get it by now. That Friday morning would be the last time I'd see Jay for almost 10 years. We moved forward to the first day of sophomore year. We were all sitting in our chairs and the teacher calls out everyone's names. When she called out Jay's, I almost soiled myself. I looked around frantically until this short, overweight kid raised his hand. He was almost a carbon copy of the little kid I remembered. Except now, he looked even worse. His hair was long and greasy, his face covered by patches of hair, and he was wearing this old gray jacket with stains all over it. I think it may have been a members-only one. This was 2013. I was unable to grasp why he looked so bad. As far as I was aware, his family wasn't poor. In fact, I believe his dad was a dentist with his own practice. My amazement toward him would only grow. As class was let out and he passed by me, a cloud of stink almost knocked me down. Man, did he smell. Similar to wet garbage. I probably should have expected it considering his appearance, but this level of funk was all new to me. I did my best to keep my head down and slip out unnoticed. As far as I could tell, he didn't remember me, and boy was I relieved. Little did I know, his hygiene would become the least of his cons. A month passed and school was as lame as ever. Jay remained offensive to the nose and eyes. His gray jacket had become dirtier than his hair. I think he even had Dorito crumbs falling off of it one morning. Unfortunately, his behavior would be far nastier. I caught wind of a story going around that some kid was showing other male students lewd photos of his sister. When I discovered it was Jay, I can't say I was shocked. Disgusted, but not shocked. Eventually, my time came. He approached me in my locker and shoved his phone in my face. Once I was able to focus on the screen, I realized it was indeed a photo of a girl who looked disturbingly similar to himself. I can't say I recall the quality of the picture. The stench was just too distracting. Even though I was in a constant state of discomfort, I was taken aback at how proud he was of the picture. His smile stretched from ear to ear. It was like he was showing me a hot rod he'd built with his dad. And perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the encounter was when I learned that the girl was only 13. I couldn't imagine how strange his relationship with his sister must have been. No matter how gruesome things connected to this dude were, he always managed to outdo himself. I guess the shots were so popular, he took things up a level and began selling the videos of her showering. Although I was lucky enough not to see those atrocities, I was told by folks who did that rather than being some creep videos, the subject was well aware that she was being filmed. I can't say she was aware her brother was selling him, though. Of course, Jay's dirty little secret wouldn't stay that way for long. It wasn't more than a week after he launched his filmic endeavor before it was shut down. The principal and others in power at the school got word of his actions, and he was brought in for questioning. Once they had a full grip on what had been going on right under their noses, law enforcement was informed, thankfully. The rest came to me by word of mouth, so take it with a pinch of salt. According to some people, things between Jay and his sister were even more shocking than we believed. She would admit that her and Jay had been involved in some form of physical relationship for the last 3 years. In addition to that, he wasn't just selling videos around school. He'd been peddling far more explicit clips on the dark web, believe it or not, at least what I was hearing. The rumor mill was churning in overdrive. Jay's sudden disappearance led to all kinds of theories and suppositions. What I do know is that he was gone almost as quickly as he had arrived, and not many missed him. The same source I had gotten my information from prior claimed he had done a few months in a juvenile facility and was released. Basically a slap on the wrist. However, at the time, there was still the question of how hard the feds were going to go after him. Unfortunately, life moved on, and I guess folks forgot about Jay. And I can't tell you his ultimate fate. Despite him being a disgusting mess of a person, I feel bad for the others who suffered because of him. The strain revolving around the situation caused his parents to divorce, but perhaps the person who suffered the most was his younger sister. Not only had her public life been ruined, she was forced to drop out of school soon after it all came out. The abuse she had suffered at the hands of Jay has to have done some major long-term damage. I pray she's been able to make something of her life. As for Jay, I could care less how he is. Creatures like him never change. They destroy lives of all those around them, and the world will be a much better place without him. I attended most of my schooling in a small town in southern Oklahoma. In a place with such a small population, you get to know everybody pretty fast. When you're a kid, this can be a big headache. You can't make a single mistake without everyone around knowing about it, including your folks. To this day, I can still tell you the name of the girl that ate paste in kindergarten and the boy who peed his pants in 3rd grade. It's not a way I'd like my kids to grow up. Nonetheless, even in a place so small, there was one kid who managed to live a second, invisible life right under the noses of the nosiest of citizens. For the sake of the story, I'll call him Elliot. He was the last person you'd expect of having a secret life. His family had run the largest business in the county for 100 years. If I recall correctly, he even had 2 uncles who had served in the state legislature. He had been raised to be a successful person, and on the surface, nothing about him gave you the impression that he was anything else. All the teachers loved him. His grades were always better than everyone else's, and he never hesitated to make himself the center of attention. Even with every eye in the area on him, he had one habit no one had any clue about. Elliot liked to watch. This clean-cut, unassuming young man was a peeper, a peeping Tom, a voyeur, if you will. Of course, nobody knew this, or admitted to it at least. This would all change on the night of homecoming. Our classmates were all kitted up in their finest, each waiting their turn to get their pictures taken so they could head to their real destination, a local hotel where loads of cheap booze awaited them. Normally, Elliot would be one of the few actually attending the dance with his girlfriend. Instead, while the rest of the town had their minds on the celebration, he was creeping through his quiet neighborhood in search of something to see. Just before 11, he came upon the open window of a 10-year-old girl. He later told the police that, on a prior expedition, he had noticed the girl's open curtains. Upon getting closer, he watched as she removed her clothes for bed. And despite knowing it was wrong, he realized for the first time that he was attracted to very young girls. He claimed he was disgusted by this and cut his nighttime journey short. As time passed, however, the urge to return overtook him. Because of all the people on the streets that night, he wasn't able to return early enough to relive the previous adventure in his mind. When he arrived and saw the open window, a little voice told him to go inside. The house is dark. Everyone's already in bed, so no one would see you. Besides, you just want to watch her sleep, that's all. Unfortunately, Elliot listened to this voice. Entering as silently as possible, he walked across the room toward the corner. He was just inches away when he stepped on a squeaky dog toy, apparently. The high-pitched noise echoed through the room. He froze and prayed the girl wouldn't be awakened. God was not with him that night at all. She shot up in bed as if she had been awaiting such a moment. And things just got worse from there. She turned on her bedside light, and Elliot was fully illuminated. The terrified girl began screaming, and Elliot knew he only had a few seconds to flee. He turned and ran for the window, and he was mere feet away from where a strong hand grabbed him by the collar and yanked him back in. He barely hit the floor before a hail of powerful kicks and punches rained down upon him. The most he could do was curl up and take the abuse. A moment later, the violence stopped and he peeked out from his arm. And looking down on him was who he had assumed to be the girl's father. The man's face terrified him. He'd never seen such anger until then. The police arrived quickly, and within minutes, they had Elliot in cuffs. It wasn't long before the whole town knew. Although he hadn't done more than trespass into a house at night, the district attorney tried to charge him with every crime possible. Even with all the money and influence of his family behind him, there was no way he was getting off scot-free. He had foolishly spoken to the cops. They had his words to use against him. His lawyer was able to get the DA to drop most of the charges in exchange for a plea. Ultimately, he served 13 months in jail with an additional 5 years probation tacked on. The length of the sentence meant nothing. His life in Tao was over. After he was released, he became a prisoner in his own home. He didn't dare leave. A day didn't go by without some death threat or other harassment on his phone. To the relief of everybody, the day his probation ended, he quietly slipped out of town in the middle of the night, never to be seen again.